Welcome to season 2 of Diced Onion, a Warrior podcast. We are your hosts. I'm Angelo Fioris. That is Mike Haggerty, and we're going to take you through season 2 of the incredible show Warrior. We wrapped up season 1 a couple of weeks ago, and I couldn't wait to get back at it, Mike, because season 2, episode 1 really kicks things off in a big way, doesn't it?
Yeah, they don't even take a breath. They just get right into it. And the show never let you down. It picks up pretty much right where it was. In fact, as I was watching, because now through the magic of streaming and these seasons have already happened, so I went right from season 1 to season 2, and it was almost like at the time there was a few months in between seasons, but I guess what I'm trying to say is it felt like just a complete continuity here. It was like
it could have been episode 11, season 1, just as much.
Yeah, right? It's like I think that's what I was trying to say. So there was just it just flowed.
It feels like it does fit into the storyline. You didn't feel like with many shows when there's a hiatus between seasons, the characters or at least the actors sometimes come back looking a little different, whether they've put on weight or they've grown or they aged or whatever it is. But in this case, you're right. Everybody kind of looks exactly like they did when we left them. So let's pick up with season 2, episode 1, Learn to Endure or Hire a Bodyguard. Air date originally October 2nd, 2020, and the pre-credit scene opens up with Sam doing what we know him to do best, fighting.
Yeah, and it looks like he's in a competitive situation. I would say almost like a precursor to boxing or MMA. It's a competitive fight. There's a crowd around, and they're cheering him on, or they're cheering for the fight anyway, or not necessarily for him. And it looks like he's sort of getting I took this as a little bit of redemption after the loss to after his loss in season 1. I took this a little bit, Lee Young, too. A little bit of redemption narrative. That's why I took from it anyway.
I felt like this was some sort of, as we're watching, some sort of like underground gambling fighting, much like their duel in episode 1 was an underground Chinese boxing match. This was more like you said, more like a little no holds barred in a sense, where there wasn't a whole lot of honor or rules going on here. And you didn't get the sense that this was any sort of organized boxing league or fighting league or anything like that. And so we're watching him go at it against a guy that is of a different weight, different size. He's a big dude, and definitely has a different fighting style than Ah Sam has.
Yeah, and there's no respect for the weight classes either.
Right, that's kind of what I was getting at there. Exactly.
Yeah, but he's Ah Sam, so he wins as we expect him to. And
but not before he almost gets choked out by the big guy. When the big guy throws him on the ground and Ah Sam looks up at him, Ah Sam kind of has like a flashback real quick to Lee Young standing over him kind of just before he pulled the sash off of him. Right. So you could see, like, I don't know what you want to call that. It was almost kind of like a PTSD moment for Ah Sam there as he was fighting and reliving part of the beatdown that he took at the hands of Lee Young. But then the rock and roll music kicks in and Ah Sam starts his comeback. And like you said, he does win. He is the man. He does manage to knock this dude out. He breaks both his hands. He breaks both of this guy's hands. And the guy is like this, can't do nothing, and decides he's just going to charge. And that's when Ah Sam hits him with the leg kick and knocks him out right there. It was pretty graphic fight, actually.
Yeah, and well, as we go through this episode, we're going to see more graphic.
Very, very.
Where this is just the beginning. This is just the opening salvo.
Yeah, and we get conclusion as to what's going on here, because after the fight is over, Ah Sam goes kind of upstairs, and there's a lady who we noticed watching the fight from like the balcony area, and she pays Ah Sam some money. So obviously he's getting paid to fight and win, whether he's getting a salary or whether he's getting a cut of gambling winnings. I'm not sure how that's all working out, but he and this lady, they kind of know
Rosalita.
What's that? Rosalita?
Rosalita Vega.
Vega, yeah, right. Vega. So Rosalita knows Ah Sam at this point because they're speaking semi-familiar. They've been through this before, because she says to him, "You never count the money I give you." And he trusts her.
Yeah, and he trusts her. And we see that she's trying to kind of get to know him here.
Yeah.
She asks him sort of if he needs any help, but he's still sort of being reserved. And he doesn't want any help from her. You can see that they actually have a familiar, at least a familiar relationship, if not what I would call a friendship. But there's a familiarity here, but wouldn't quite say blossom into friendship yet. But he trusts her enough that he doesn't count the money.
Right. He says, I'm pretty sure you don't make mistakes. And so as they're talking, she gets the sense that he's got a higher calling in a sense and that he's above a lot of what he's participating in. Because she asks him, what's a hatchet man like you doing in a place like this? This doesn't really seem like it's for you. Right. And that's kind of where it sort of ends. Assam doesn't reveal a lot at all, does he?
No, he's still holding his cards pretty close to the vest, and I would imagine that in this environment, he probably has to be careful of who he trusts. I mean, we're in kind of a seat. Well, I don't know if I'd call it a bar. It's a boat, so I don't know. It's a bar boat, the Barbary Coast.
Barbary Coast, right?
Yeah, the Barbary Coast bar. So it doesn't look like it's something that would probably make make one of the best reviews on
Yelp.
Yelp. That's it. Yeah.
It's as seedy as they come. That's a headline to my review. But as the scene closes, Mike, we do get the sense that there's a little, like you said, maybe not their friendship quite yet, but there's some sort of chemistry going on between Vega and Assam. But that is where the scene ends. We head to the credits, and as we come out of the credits, we're at a cemetery now, and it's Leary paying respects to what we figure out is his wife. You see her name on the headstone. It says Rose, as you see over his shoulder. And as he's paying his respects kind of quietly, a girl walks up to him and stands next to him and asks him, is that your wife? And he responds, yeah, and my two boys. So his whole family's in the grave.
Yeah. And she was being a little bit forward. She seemed like she was sort of aggressive and
a little too familiar in her questioning, I would say. Like, you don't even know the guy and you're already getting right into his business, right?
Yeah. And so he explains to her that, yeah, this is his wife and his sons and that they would be almost grown at this point.
Right.
And he explains it was part of the smallpox breakout. We find out that Leary came from New York, a little bit of his backstory.
Yeah.
Came from New York out west to San Francisco. And so this young woman gives him some flowers, and they have a little bit of a. Sorry,
she puts flowers on the grave. But before they got a little flirting going on. I know that's where you're talking going on. That's kind of, I know where you're going. But she says something when she goes to put the flowers on the grave, and Leary says, "What are you doing?"
Yeah, almost like he was borderline offended there for a second.
Yeah, like she was, finally she had fully overstepped her bounds, or he was just maybe surprised that someone was doing something kind, a stranger or whatever. But her answer was kind of telling, where she says, well, my father is buried here. There's tons of flowers on his grave. It's too many flowers for one person, so I like to spread them around the cemetery. And that's where she goes and she leaves the one on his family's grave. But interestingly, that's when they start to kind of banter a little bit, don't they?
Yeah, and he says something to the effect of, well, I'm sure your father appreciates it. And she says, no, my father would absolutely hate it.
No, she said he would have fucking hated it, is what she said.
That's right. And then that leads him to he's a little surprised to hear a young woman using that type of language. And she goes, well, I imagine you haven't been around too many nice girls. Or I imagine that being about proper girls, you're probably not around a lot of proper girls. So you see, they're both making assumptions about each other here, but it's all part of that sort of flirtatious thing.
Yeah, which is really weird. And they debate her properness, because he says, I didn't know proper women swear it. And she's like, well, you don't know that I'm a proper woman. And what do you know about proper people? And that's when they both kind of make judgments about them. But after they debate her properness, she kind of walks off, and the scene ends there with Leary standing in front of the grave. And he does kind of a funny, like, it's like his attention got redirected back to why he was there originally, was to visit his wife. And he's kind of like, he didn't know what to do next. He felt guilty almost, right?
Yeah, I was going to say it almost like he got caught flirting by his wife. Actually.
Yeah.
I got a kick out of that.
And give the actor a lot of credit, because he does an excellent job of conveying exactly that without using a single word.
Yeah, we saw a new side to Leary here. We see a little bit of the flirtatious
side,
the human side, and mourning his family. See, I saw a lot of Leary. This is actually a very revealing scene for Leary.
Yeah,
and like absolutely. You said, credit to the actor.
You see beyond just the bully, right? The low totem pole bully. We see more than that now. We get into what's making him tick. We're back at Toys now, first time in season 2, and she is coming down the stairs in this long, flowing dress that is about as elegant as it comes. And she just looks awesome. The actress is perfect in the role, and the way she kind of just, I don't know, flows down the stairs is I don't know, it just has like an elegance to it. I don't know how to put it.
Yeah, a toy, even though she may be a pimp, she has a certain level of class. She has a lot of class, actually.
She has tons of it. Yeah.
Yeah, she might arguably be the classiest person on the show. I don't know, that'd be a debate for another time. But
Yeah.
yeah,
But
she does. She carries herself with a lot of confidence and with a lot of joie de vivre, as the French may say.
Yeah, she's definitely sure, comfortable in her own skin. Let's put it that way about Atoy. This is when we see Assam is there at Atoy's after his fighting, and Lai is attending to him, almost like attending to his wounds in some way. And that's when Atoy comes in, and she sort of takes over. And once again, Atoy is almost like the angel on his shoulder, whispering in his ears, always trying to talk to him and make sense to him and give him good advice. And she's telling him he's got to kind of stop doing this fighting thing because he's not going to find what he's looking for.
Right. And then he proceeds to tell her, well, actually, okay. What he proceeds to tell her kind of harkens me back to the last episode of season 1 when she told him that about how Lee Young had something to fight for. And now with the scene as it progresses, we see that now Assam is looking for something to fight for. He has something to fight for because he's telling her about this new sort of group in town, a bunch of white supremacists, I'll call them, that they've been targeting Asians and Chinese. And they wear, I think he said, the letter Q on their jacket. They have some sort of symbol. And he's telling her about them. And she seems hesitant. She doesn't want to do this. She doesn't want to be a part of this.
Yeah, he wants to tangle with these guys. He says to her that he learned in his scrapping over at the Barbary Coast Fight Club, if you will, that this group called the Teddy Boys, scalping Chinese is one of their initiations or part of their initiation. And so he says to her, "Hey, I'm trying to help," meaning the fight, in the fight against what all the Chinese are up against in a sense. And she's not really feeling it, right? Obviously, he's inferring that he needs her sword to make this happen, right? And he's like, let's go get some revenge before they kill the next Chinese guy and gain themselves another scalp. But we're left without that being resolved, and we don't get the sense that Atoy is really feeling this excursion.
No, she's not down with it right now. She's being a little bit cautious, and I don't know. I'm not sure why she's being cautious at this point, or maybe she was talking about a different kind of fight with Assam as she was at the end of season 1, the last episode. But it seems like she's sort of inspired something in Assam that she doesn't quite fully understand.
The scene ends with an excellent piece of editing where Assam says he doesn't care about whether how Atoy feels about it because he says, "I'm going back tonight." And just as he says tonight, it gets spliced with Bill's voice saying, "You got to pay me tonight." And here's Bill, right? The scene cuts right back.
I missed that. I didn't catch that.
Did you miss that? They both kind of say the word tonight at the same time.
Wow,
and
that's awesome.
It's a brilliant piece of sound and video or film editing. And here's Bill now in his new job where we left him last season as a collector for the Fung Hai. And there he is telling the next down on his luck guy that it's time to pay up. And this guy reminds me of Bill earlier in season 1 where he had no money. And so Bill is now explaining to him what's got to happen next.
Well, let me ask you something here. Do you think that, because the way this scene plays out, do you think that Bill has almost sort of switched roles where he went from, and I don't know, obviously he switched roles from being the collectee to being the collector, but that he sort of sees the Fung Hai's position, like, you got to pay your debts.
I don't know that he sees the Fung Hai's position. I mean, he's a gambler who's been on the losing end, so he knows you got to pay. And so I think that's the position that Bill's coming from because he's not, you notice Bill's not really threatening the violence necessarily that like Damon outwardly used to do when he had the position. But Bill has a way of getting his point across that it's not going to be a good end for this guy if he doesn't pay up. And I've got no money. I'm tapped out. I got no money. And that's when Bill notices the guy's wearing a ring on his finger. And Bill says, well, what about the ring? And the guy's reluctant to hand that over because it's a family heirloom or something. Yeah. But eventually he has to hand it over to Bill.
Yeah, one way or the other, you got to pay, because whether it's Bill or it's the Fung Hai, it's going to get worse for him, and that's the bottom line. But I'm just sort of wondering if Bill has sort of evolved here. I wouldn't say it's a Stockholm syndrome, because clearly he's not going to be a fan of the Fung Hai. But I think Bill's just sort of he's seen both ends of the perspective of the collector and the collectee. But I see what you're saying as well. But.
So that's where the scene ends. Bill takes the ring as payment from the guy. I wondered, is that partial payment or will that cover everything? You know? But that is where the scene ends. And we now cut away to Mayor Blake and Penny, his wife, having breakfast. And we quickly understand that Penny now runs her father's factory. We saw that was probably going to come at the end of season 1. And now it's been confirmed when the mayor says that, this is pretty embarrassing that my wife is running a factory with 100 coolies working for her, and he doesn't like it.
No, and this is where the political aspect of it comes in, because obviously the contention of labor between the Chinese immigrants and the Irish immigrants, that's a point of contention, and the Irish are going to be voting, and let's face it, the white people are going to be voting. So he's kind of caught in the middle of this, and now his wife is in the middle, probably more than he is, actually.
Yeah,
this is a political and a labor issue, and you can see this has added some more tension to their otherwise happy marriage.
Well, she has taken 100 jobs away from the Irishman, and so this is where Blake basically tells her that he wants her to sell. Merriweather, the other guy who I think we saw bantering with her father in season 1, has made a couple of overtures to sell, and she's just not interested. It's my father's factory, and I'm not selling it, and that's the end of it. And he's not. He doesn't like that one bit.
No, and this is obviously going to become a point of contention throughout the rest of the episode, if not the season. We'll see how this plays out. But we see where Penny's headstrong, and she's not going to back down. She's not going to play to how people expect her to act.
Yeah, so. And she's not a politician, so she's refusing to play a political game, even though she is married to the, I would say, most powerful man in the city, in quotes, because as we established, he's kind of a dopey puppet more than anything else. But this is where we get the first curveball thrown at us, as the girl from the cemetery comes walking into the kitchen or the dining area where they're having their meal. And we find out her name is Sophie, and we find out that she is indeed Penny's sister. So you start to connect that with the cemetery scene, and you think of how Mr. Mercer died almost at the hands of Leary, and therein lies the first direct intersection of the other side of the labor, the family side, meshing with the working man.
And there she's talking about in the cemetery with Leary about her father, who's just up the hill.
Right.
And that he's sort of indirectly responsible for that. And now you're like, oh, wow. And you kind of tie that together. That was really cool.
Yeah.
And we also see a bit more of her playful side. She's a bit of a wise ass.
Yeah, she's a complete wise ass, because she starts needling the mayor, doesn't she?
Right. She says, Mr. Mayor. And he goes, I told you to call me by my name.
Call me Samuel.
Call me Samuel. And she proceeds to do that in a way that is just very condescending, very
and annoying smart as hell.
Yeah, and he proceeds to leave breakfast.
I love the scene because she starts going in on the pass the bread, Samuel. Thank you, Samuel. I appreciate that, Samuel. And that's when he gets up to leave. He says, I have work to attend to. And as he walks away, he goes, ladies. And she goes, Samuel, one last time. And you see it freezes on his face, and you see the annoyance on his face as she says it, but he composes himself and does walk off. But it's a very funny scene. But even Penny, who loathes him, tells her, maybe you ought to respect the guy a little bit more, at least while you're living in his house. So she lives there with them.
Yeah, and it was a very subtle way to find out that they do have someone her sister living in their house.
Yeah, I wonder if that was a condition in season 1, or was that something that kind of happened in the interim where she moved in with them for one reason or another. We're not really sure, but they are chit-chatting a little bit, talking about another sister of theirs who's away at boarding school. And then this is when Penny sort of kind of tries to set Sophie up with some guy who expressed some interest in her when he saw her from afar. And she's not interested in him either.
No, and I'm just taking this as between what I saw with her flirtation with Leary, that she maybe has a thing for the bad boys, or maybe the people on the other side of the tracks. She's not attracted to people in her own element, I'm guessing.
Or yeah, that, or maybe she's just a bit of a free spirit and she's not looking for any shackles of a relationship at this point in her life. There's a lot of things going on with this girl that we don't know about. But it was funny to me that when Penny mentions the man who is taking a liking to her when he noticed her, Sophie says, "Yep, he noticed me at our father's funeral." I'm not going to go out with a guy who's attracted to me at my like lowest of grief or whatever, or something like that. I guess in a sense, like, hey, a funeral's not a pickup joint, not a place just to try to hook up. But anyway, the funny thing is that when Penny tries to set her up with the guy, and she refuses, Penny says, "You're absolutely impossible," and she says, "No, I'm discerning. You ought to try it sometime."
Ah, yes, that was a little shot across the bow.
Woo, a little shot. That was a slap across the face right there. And again, in the lady's house. So this girl kind of doesn't have any respect for the boundaries of, don't bite the hand that feeds you, in a sense.
No, she doesn't care, and I really like that scene, the way it played out.
Yeah.
Especially, they went back and like you said about their other sister, and Sophie kind of blamed Penny for their other sister not living with them, and Penny says, "Well, wait a minute, that wasn't my fault."
Right. She wanted to go to boarding school. So,
right.
So it gives you that hint, though, that there was something going on there before the girl went off to boarding school, like whether she ran off or, was driven off, or whether there was a fight or something. You get the sense that it wasn't just like, "Hey, I want to go to boarding school. Can you send me?" I don't think that that's quite how that played out. Scene cuts away now after Penny shows her hurt and disappointment in her sister and taking that jab at her. And we're back to Chinatown, where Mei Ling and Li Young are walking around, and she is walking around like the Queen of England, isn't she, at this point?
Yeah, kind of. I don't know if this was meant to be an homage, but it kind of reminded me of in The Godfather when Vito Corleone was walking around the fruit stand and buying oranges. In this case, just before he got shot.
Right. But I just watched it the other night, by the way.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, you got to watch that movie. Yeah. That's one of those movies that if I'm watching, I'm just locked in. But
good point. She comes to the fruit stand and she is buying fruit. I don't know if that was an homage. I didn't even think of it, actually. But now that you bring it up, perhaps it is a little bit.
It actually just occurred to me now as I was thinking about it, too, because it was a very interesting location. I mean, granted, in China, even now today, Chinatown or Little Italy, you're gonna find fruit markets and things like that. Or was that place in Philadelphia, the Open Market, or I forget what it's called, but you're gonna see that all the time. And obviously, Chinese vendors, and she's patronizing local vendors. And this scene played out. It also harkened me back to the opening scene after the credits with Leary, and then we got to see another side of Mei Ling in this scene as it plays out.
Yeah, good point. We get to see that Mei Ling has a bit of a human side to her as well, because when she is at the fruit stand picking up a couple lemons or something like that, she notices that the vendor's wife is sick. She's either coughing, she's not able to stand up, she's kind of leaning against the wall or whatever. And Mei Ling says to her, "Hey, your wife needs to go to the doctor." And he says, "Well, we'll do it after we close. She knows that it takes two of us to kind of run the stand." And so, in essence, it's sort of like the plight of the poor people, right? I can't afford to miss a day's work, even if I'm sick. And that's a tough spot to be in. And Mei Ling, this is where Mei Ling shows some compassion.
Yeah, she buys out his stand. And even Li Young looked a little bit surprised here, I thought. And the vendor was certainly surprised. And she did it so he could close up shop for the day and take his wife to the hospital, which she practically insisted on.
Yeah, I'll take it all, she says. And she motions to Li Young, and he just pulls out like a wad of cash, and she hands it over to the guy and says, "Close up this shop and take your wife to the doctor." So obviously, Mei Ling, she has a soul, right? But she is still the enemy. And here comes young Jun and Ah Sam, and they notice her. And young Jun is really, he's really hot about the fact that they've lost their position in the neighborhood after the duel. And he even says it, look at her over there walking around like she owns the place, like she's the queen. And he goes, I don't like this one bit. And that's when they start talking, talking about maybe what they got to do to fight back. And Mei Ling sees young Jun, and he expresses once again her discontent to her by spitting in her direction. It was one of those scenes where you could almost feel the tension from across the street between those two. And I wasn't sure at first. I was like, are these guys going to scrap right here now? Like, I wasn't sure if it wasn't going to go there or not.
Yeah, especially with young Jun, and I don't think young Jun would have stood a shot against Li Young, but because right now it appears that the only person who is even close to Li Young skill wise, and vice versa, is Assam. So I was like, this would have been interesting, but and then again, also if that had happened, what would Assam have done with his sister right there? Because even though she clearly did order his death, and he knows that, we don't know where he stands, and then we sort of see that he kind of stops young Jun, like, okay, Leah, let's just move along.
Right.
But why did he do that? Did he do that because he's in the Hop Wei? Or did he do it because that's his sister? Or because he knew that Li Young is a fierce competitor, even though there's two of them? Don't know.
Yeah, that's very interesting because we know what we know about Assam, except for like a couple of other characters like Chow and Atoy. Only we know what we know about Assam as far as the universe in Warrior goes. So the fact that his allegiances are still kind of split you bring up a good point, as in why did he stop young Jun? Protect Mei Ling, protect young Jun, probably a little bit of both, to tell you the truth. We now cut away to Buckley and the mayor. And of course, what are they talking about? The mayor's wife hiring the Chinese. And it is a very testy conversation, isn't it?
Yeah, this is going to be a plot point, at least in this episode. And what I'm kind of, I don't want to say I'm struggling with, but with Buckley, because we know he's playing both sides of the fence, right? He wants to start conflict in Chinatown, but at the same time, he knows that Chinese labor outbidding Irish labor is going to be a problem. And he's pointing this out to the mayor, and how his own wife, with her own factory, is hiring Chinese labor. And the fact that the mayor this is his wife, and this is a business that has a contract with the government. It's a definite, I mean, forget your father-in-law. Now it's your wife, right? Your father-in-law was a conflict of interest. Holy crap. Yeah, your wife running a business that is got a government contract. That's a conflict of interest. And Buckley points it.
Yeah, and when he points it out to him, it comes at the point where the mayor says to Buckley, just raise the bid. He says, we can't have the mayor's wife having Chinese laborers. He goes, fine, then just raise the bid so that she can hire Irish labor. And that's when he points out, so now we're going to give your family contracts and also change bids to give them. How's that gonna look? I'm trying to protect you here, and you're coming up with these cockamamie ideas. And that's when the mayor says to Buckley, I don't want to appear like a hypocrite. And Buckley's response was, that ship has already sailed on that. And the mayor stops and like looks at him kind of angrily. And that's when Buckley adds on, because of your wife hiring Chinese labor, like addendum to the sentence. And that's when that kind of ends it all kind of right there. But Buckley does end it by saying to the mayor, a man that can't control his wife, ... And
that was a little shot across the bow too. That was his way of saying F you to the mayor, I think.
That's interesting though, coming from a guy that ain't even got a wife.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, that's a good point. That's a really good point. But I took that as his own little way of saying, even though he's the guy behind the scenes, he's had to sort of take the mayor's crap. And I thought this was a little bit of a pushback from him.
Yeah, and I think he's also pointing out once again that the mayor is weak, and that if it wasn't for Buckley, he'd be in a lot deeper doo-doo than he's in right now.
Yep.
Even though Buckley is a source of at least half of that deep doo-doo that he's in.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. We're now back at Hop Wei headquarters, and it is young Jun, and he is still hot and angry about Mei Ling, and he is not shy about expressing his feelings to Father Jun, who is still trying to keep his eyes on the long game. But young Jun's not interested in that part of the conversation.
No, young Jun is like we've seen already, young Jun is not happy about the situation. He's just going off on his father in a way that no one else in the Hop Wei could. I'm assuming because he's a Hop Wei, but he is still his son, and he's ranting at his father.
But it's
And his father,
but it's in front of other people though.
which is also heightening the disrespect. And he's talking about appearances, and Father Jun says, "Don't worry about appearances. Basically, worry about what is real."
Right.
And we see that Father Jun, he's got the more moderate. They both want the same thing. They both probably feel the same, but they do feel the same way. But Father Jun is taking a more moderate approach, whereas young Jun is just more like scorch the earth type of thing. But this scene plays out, and young Jun does overstep his bounds a little bit in this scene.
Yeah, just a little bit. And Father Jun gives him a slap right across the face in front of everybody. So he's returning the disrespect, right? And he says, something else you want to add or something else you want to say? And that's when young Jun keeps his trap shut. And that's kind of the end.
Well, do you remember what he said to cause a slap? He said, as long as he was fucking her, what's your excuse?
Oh, right. And then that's when the slap came. I want to go back to one thing that Father Jun said during their talk here, which was that he felt that Mei Ling's alliance with the Fung Hai was going to be her undoing. And that's kind of where he was preaching the patience to young Jun before the slap part, and it got kind of ugly there in front of everybody. So that's where the scene ends. Father Jun once again exercises the fact that he is the man in charge, and young Jun's going to ultimately do it his way, or there's a highway. And young Jun, tail between the legs, end of the scene.
Yes.
All right. So here's Bill now. We're back. Speaking of Fung Hai, we're at Fung Hai headquarters, and here is Bill. He is there. Zing is there looking at this ring that we saw Bill acquire from the gambler earlier in the episode. And I love the line that Zing says here when he looks at
I wrote it down.
Me too.
I wrote it down. Yeah.
You want to take it or should I?
Yeah.
You're a cold motherfucker, Bill. Because let's face it, obviously Bill explained to him, yeah, I took this family heirloom off the guy. And even Zing says, by Zing saying that, it makes you think like maybe even Zing might not have taken that ring off the guy just yet. But I think Bill's looking for a means to an end to just get the hell out of every situation.
I actually think Zing would have taken the ring with the finger off the guy.
Maybe that's a point too. Maybe Bill's cold, but Zing is vicious, right? But this is where Bill says to him, all right, we're even now. I did this thing for you. I did the collecting. No more of this. And Zing is not having that either, is he?
Yeah, Zing actually had another good line that I wrote down here. He goes, mouth pray to Buddha, but heart say something else. And he basically, this scene, we find out that Zing knows what Bill's buttons are because he's saying, he goes, no, it's no debt. You work for me. But he's playing it real casual, like, hey, you work for me. We're in this together. Company picnic. And then yeah, potato sack race at the company picnic. But then he plays the card. He knows, this is where we see he knows how to push Bill's buttons because he hands Bill a wad of K-Up like that.
He holds it out.
Yep. And that's Bill's button because Bill cares about money because ultimately he cares about gambling. And Bill this is going to be an ongoing thing.
Yeah, but it's funny because Bill's trying to stand his ground and get out of this. And as that wad of cash is in front of him, you see Bill's face, and he is having that internal conflict about whether or not to take the money. And he reluctantly takes the cash from Zing just as reluctantly as the guy handed him the ring. So,
good point.
But when Bill took that money, the first time I watched this episode, this is my maybe my third watching now, but the first time I watched it, you're still hoping for redemption for Bill, right? And when he reaches out and he takes the money, I remember saying to myself, come on, Bill, be better. But he couldn't and he can't. And that is where the scene ends. And now Bill is even more intertwined with the very element that he is being charged to eliminate. So this is a crazy turn of events.
Yeah, Bill is knee deep with it. When not only forget the Chinese, but the Fung Hai no less. And he's replaced. Well, not basically. He has replaced Damon, a guy who he had essentially killed for almost the same thing, really.
Yeah, get out of a guy he killed to get out of paying what he owed. In a sense.
Yes. So Bill is a hypocrite on top of everything else.
On top of everything else. It's a shame. We now cut away. There's Mei Ling, and she's praying. There's looks like incense or candles, and there's the statue of, I guess, the Buddha, right? I don't know. Call me ignorant on that one. I wasn't sure, but that's when Assam walks in. I guess he knew where she was going to be, right? And she sees him, and they immediately talk, and it's not a good conversation, is it?
No, and actually something else just dawned on me. We're talking about how scenes are sort of oddly connected.
Yeah.
How Zing said mouth pray to Buddha, and
And then
here they are.
Nice.
I just made that connection this second. So little, maybe it's an Easter egg. I don't know, but
it's a good connector to basically what happened in the last scene, though, right? Because
yeah,
mouth pray to Buddha, right there. We see her doing it.
yeah, she is bringing, and it goes back to what you said earlier about tonight between Assam saying it and Bill saying it, which where the scene where he collected the ring. So that was that just occurred to me now. So I don't know,
Good
moment
stuff.
of inspiration.
I really like it, and I really like the connection there that we just stumbled onto. As they're talking, Assam right away says to her, "Hey, you tried to have me diced," and she says, "I tried to keep you out of that fight." And clearly, they're now at odds, and it's funny because they start getting into a, yeah, but you did this and you did this. And they totally fell into the sibling argument. Like, it reminded me of me and my brother when we were like 11 and 13 years old or something. And they were almost like childish in a sense. And this is where she admonishes him. She's like, look at you. You're back in the Hop Wei. They left you to rot. And now you're one of them again. And so this is not a good conversation between these two.
No, and she's telling, and then she tries to kind of bring it around, and she goes, they're not going to last because Father June is not going to live forever, and young June is no leader. And she goes, who's going to lead him after that? And he kind of gives her the look, and he's let her know that, hey, could be me.
Right.
And now she really knows that if theoretically, if Assam ends up being the head of the Hop Wei, that would be a very interesting dynamic. And now she knows it. Now, for the first time, she's seeing him as a rival. Maybe for the first time, she's seeing him sort of at her level. Maybe up until now, she's not really seen him at that level, or at least close to that level. But he's at the upper levels of power in the Hop Wei now. Hop Wei.
Which is crazy development when you think about it. But he went from being sort of like a nuisance to her and in the way to now possibly being the competition. And he makes it clear that he's chosen his side. And she said, "I don't want you to be on the losing side," but that's already those cards have been drawn. And this is where he's got an interest in going up against her when he says, "You're gonna wish that you had killed me." And her response is, "Well, there's always tomorrow."
Which I thought that was cold.
Yeah, cold. And then Lee Young is there the whole time this conversation's going on. And as Lee Young turns to leave, he just looks at Assam and he kind of gives him the eyebrow, and they both kind of, and that's Lee Young being like, "Hey, remember I kicked your ass," kind of look. And there ain't a thing Assam can do or say about that. He had to walk off at that point.
Yeah, he did get his ass kicked.
Yeah.
And I actually thought that was a little funny. That made me chuckle a little bit. There was almost like a little bit of,
It was a schoolyard teasing, right? You had two siblings fighting, a kid kind of argument, and then here's Lee Young kind of just throwing the ice, the salt on the wound there at the end to just remind you, hey, you remember I got you last time. So he is definitely the top dog right now in that relationship between those two. And Assam is pissed clearly because the next scene is him at that training tree, that thing, and he's hitting that thing really hard when Father June walks in.
Yeah, and this scene, this might have been my favorite scene in the episode, just the way it played out, because Father June, he said, "Oh, I'm sorry that I interrupt. I didn't mean to interrupt."
Right.
And he's talking about young June, and now we're seeing that I'm getting the sense that he has doubts about young June's leadership qualities. And I'm wondering, and this is my take on this, because he's basically saying, he's complaining about young June to Assam. He's complaining to him about he's complaining about his son to another guy in their organization. And right. I'm almost wondering, just in the back and forth here between these two, if he wasn't sort of maybe seeing if maybe Assam could potentially be a leader, maybe better than his own son.
And maybe subconsciously or in the back of his mind views him as a future threat to his powerful position, right?
True.
But
true.
In his talk with Assam, he discusses young Jun's lack of patience. And I wonder, Mike, when he went to Assam to kind of, I don't know, get this off his chest in a sense. I felt like it was like, when people have an argument with a family member or someone close to them, and after the argument's over and you're sitting home or you're sitting alone and you're kind of stewing over it, you gotta like talk about it to somebody. And sometimes you pick someone who's not even supposed to be involved in the conversation to vent. And I almost felt like Father Jun was venting a little bit about and almost maybe feeling bad that he had to slap young Jun in front of everybody. Not by much. I don't think that he feels bad about a lot of his choices. I think he's a man of conviction, but I think that the lack of patience that he discusses with young Jun alludes to what you said, where he feels like he may not be leadership quality. And then he does actually ask Assam, are we going to have a problem? Now, what did he mean by that? Like, did he just mean that in general? Because he's back in the Tong? Because he said, we haven't spoken much since you returned to us. So I guess is he testing Assam's temperature in a sense to see where his head's at in relation to his position in the Tong? Like, what was that all about, asking if they're going to have a problem?
Good question. It could have been a couple of things. Like you said, it could have been maybe he perceives him as a threat. Or maybe he just thinks that Assam might still hold a grudge because they kind of left him behind temporarily, which Assam would have every right to feel a grudge about that, in my opinion.
Right.
That's an interesting question. I mean, again, they keep raising these questions and stuff for you to sort of ponder and think about until you get the answers. And hopefully we will get those answers.
Father Jun leaves by saying, please keep an eye on young Jun for me. And as he leaves, Assam turns back to his training tree or whatever you call that thing. And he is pounding the crap out of it. And he is mad.
Now, do you think he said that? I mean, okay, no, I'm sorry. Let me start. He didn't say that like someone might say about their son, hey, keep an eye out for my son. Like, just watch out for me. I think it was more like keep an eye out for him so he doesn't do anything stupid.
Yeah,
right?
I kind of got that hint too. Like, because like you said earlier, young Jun's got the scorched earth mentality right now. He wants to go out there, just slice and dice. And Father Jun doesn't want that to happen. And that's what he's hoping. I think that's what he was hoping to come out of that with in his conversation with Assam, which is someone to keep an eye on young Jun to keep him in check. And Assam realizes that, and that's kind of what pissed him off. He's like, great, now I got to be like the babysitter for this guy on top of everything else that they've heaped upon me. So it is a great scene, and it does just reveal a little bit more about the psyche of Father Jun here.
Yeah, on the one hand, like you said, I don't think he had any remorse about slapping his son, but on the other hand, he I don't think he views his son necessarily. I think this scene was more about Father Jun and young Jun than it was about Father Jun and Assam. Just my opinion.
I think you might be right. We're now back to Bill's house. Bill comes home. His wife is there. The kids are kind of running around, and he says, here you go, cook this up. And he hands her a steak, and she's like, steak again. So she's immediately suspicious. And Bill explains away, he goes, I haven't been to the tables, if that's what you're thinking. And then he explains some story about the guy that owns the meat shop was appreciative of Bill running off some hooligans or something, and he paid him back with some steaks. He goes, so we're going to have steak again. And she goes, okay. Does she buy this story?
Nope.
Not even for a minute, because they show her standing over the stove, Bill kind of behind her, and you could see on her face, Bill can't see her face, but you could see on her face doubt.
Yeah.
She knows when she's, I think we've talked about this before. She knows when she's being lied to by this guy. And I think she knows it again.
Yeah, she probably like so many wives we've seen in throughout history that know their men are lying to them, usually for cheating, but they sort of go with the flow. And she's going with the flow, but for whatever reason, maybe it's convenience. Maybe she loves him. I don't know.
Well, she definitely loves him, and I guess maybe she, if he's not in dire straits financially, in other words, they're not lacking for anything. So I guess she's kind of like, well, he must not be at the tables, because where else would this money be coming from? Because let's face it, as we know, Bill's not the luckiest gambler either. So,
and probably suspecting him of being the collector for the Fung Hai is pretty low on her bingo cards for Bill.
Yeah, I don't think Bill's wife even has like an awareness of that part of the world. You know what I mean?
No.
I think it's out of her field of vision. Leary, now we're back to the Irish. They're having like a meal. Looks like the working man, right? The Irish working dudes. And Leary walks in on them, bids them a good evening and says, "You enjoying your meal?" And they're like, "Absolutely, Mr. Leary. How's the job going?" "It's going good." And that's when Leary drops the bomb on him.
He's collecting union dues.
He's here to collect dues. It's time to pay your dues, lads. They're like, "Dues, but we just started working last week."
And you got a paycheck, which not a lot of people can say. Leary's not having it. He wants the money.
And he strong arms them, and he not so veiled threat. He gives a not so veiled threat that maybe they won't have that job any longer. And then he slams his hand down. So we're all going to do our part here. Yeah, he passes the hat around, and very reluctantly, the first guy reaches into his pocket, and then the rest follow suit. What I found interesting, and obviously there's no way of telling how much money went into that hat, but there was about 5 or 6 guys around that table eating, and they all tossed in paper money. So knowing like how much money was worth then versus now, $50 was $1,500 today, as we know, right? So $6 or $5 is like $150. So Leary took a good chunk of change off of those dudes if they were only throwing in dollar bills.
Yeah, he sure did.
Yeah. So I could see why they were pissed off. You saw the looks on each of their faces. I wonder if that was like a 10th or a 5th, or how much of their weekly pay could that have been in 1878?
Excuse me. Yeah, he collected quite a bit of money.
For sure.
But then we see him in the other end of the bar. We see what he was doing with the money.
Yeah, he walks into the back, like into the other part of the bar, and there's another guy waiting for him with a box, and he says, "Here you go, I got it." And they open the box, and you got the angle of their faces peering in, so you don't quite know what's in there. But we do find out quickly, don't we?
It's dynamite.
It's explosives, right? So the guy brought us some explosives, and Leary pays the guy, obviously, with the money he just scooped up off that table, right?
Yep. So
that guy takes off. You never had this meeting, and he gives him the money, and the guy's gone.
Right. Because initially I gave Leary credit for, he's looking out for the working man. He is legitimately collecting union dues to help their progress. But no, he was using it for nefarious ends, and we don't know exactly what, if he's going to finally go get that roadrunner out in the desert, or what the point is.
It reminded me of, like, when you read those stories about like the mafia and the labor unions in the Hoffa days. It's almost like the mob using the pension or the union dues to fund their criminal activities. And that's exactly what Leary is doing here. You're not buying dynamite for virtuous reasons.
Yeah, if you're not in the construction business, you're not buying explosives for good reason. That's a very limited shopping list for being above board. You're in the construction or the demolition business. That's pretty much it.
The scene now cuts away to we see what look to be like some Irish thugs, I think, and they're torturing a Chinese worker. And they got, looks like they've already been beating him up, and they're saying things like, "You come here, you take our jobs, you bring diseases, we don't like you, we don't want you,
rape our women,
you rape our women," right? All of that stuff. And they're all having a good laugh about it while they're kicking this guy around and torturing him. And that's when one of them gets the bright idea to hang the guy. And they proceed to start doing that. They tie the rope around his neck, and one of the dudes starts raising the man up, right?
But then,
just as the guy's at the peak kicking.
Yep. And then a blade, or so something cuts him down. Someone throws a blade or a knife in the air, and that man is rescued. Then you see Ah Sam, and they go, "Who are you?" And I wanted him to say, "You're about to find out." That's what I really wanted to hear. But we see Ah Sam, we see Atoy, and Lai.
It's actually Lai that cut the rope, because what you see in the scene is the guy kind of pulling down on the rope. You don't see anything else, right? And then all of a sudden the slack in that rope gives, and he falls to the ground. And when he turns around, he sees Lai there with her sword. He's like, "What the hell is this?" And then Ah Sam is right there. And this is when I finally put 2 and 2 together, Mike, that wasn't just some Irish thugs. This was those teddy boys that Ah Sam was talking about earlier in the episode that take Chinese scalps as part of their initiation. And I didn't realize it until a toy showed up. And then it was like, oh, this is that mission that he said he was going to do tonight.
Yeah, and a toy apparently changed her mind. Once I saw Lie, though, I knew that a toy had to be there.
Right,
there was,
right.
like she's not gonna. I don't think that Lie is gonna go anywhere without a toy, or at least a toy's knowledge. So,
Yeah.
and they proceed to clean house.
Yo, they
And
sliced these guys up. It's a graphic scene.
and there was one little part too where Assam broke a guy's arm, and it reminded me of an old Steven Seagal movie, the way the guy's arm broke, because it kind of like, imagine it's going the wrong way, and that
Yeah.
reminded me
Out
how,
for
like, Steven
justice.
Seagal.
That was from Out for Justice.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, and he
Yeah.
broke the guy's arm like that. Now, justice. So that reminded me of that. But this scene, not a lot of dialogue. Obviously, this is an all action oriented scene, and
One guy gets his hand cut. One guy gets his like arm cut off from like right around here, and he's walking around, runs off with a stump. Another guy gets a toy, finishes off the last dude with the sword right into the stomach, and almost kind of like disembowels him. There's a lot of blood in this scene, and before it ends, though, we see that last guy, the guy with the stump of an arm, trying to get away. He's between some boxes or something, and he's trying to run out, but he doesn't quite make it, does he?
no, because Lai finds him, and you just know she's going to get him, and they don't actually show up. But she jumps off the off the roof or whatever, and she's got the sword pointed right at him. And well,
I love when you see her jump. It's like from the perspective of seeing her. She jumps, she does like a flip, and then you hear the slice go through, but you don't really, you don't see it. And then all you got is a shot of the three of them walking off, kind of, I guess, triumphant, right?
Yeah, and I thought it was kind of interesting that Assam was kind of almost bringing up the rear. I thought, because the toy was kind of bringing the lead, and this show is kind of showing women in leading roles, and even in this, a toy was kind of the leader of this little group. Yeah, and she's a toy is definitely more powerful than Assam, I would say, at this point, anyway.
No question about it. No question about it. She's effective at her job. She's effective at swordsmanship, and she's effective at managing every aspect of her life, whereas Assam kind of is flying by the seat of his pants here. And he makes decisions on like a day-to-day, minute-by-minute basis. He does not put a lot of thought into his next actions. It's obviously morning, so they've been out all night cleaning house, because Assam finally returns to Hop Wei headquarters, and that is where we see young Jun smoking a cigarette, and he sees Assam, and they start to talk.
Yeah, and he's at first, young Jun, it seems like he's sort of making some small talk. He says, "Are we out fighting?" And Sam doesn't really give a straight answer to that. We know he has been fighting, just not on the Barbary Coast.
Right. Yeah. So he kind of lets young Jun think what he thinks, which is, I was out fighting.
And then young Jun says, "Oh, I'll have to get out and see you at some point." And so then young Jun finally gets to the point. He tosses him something, and Assam opens it up, and it's a ball of molasses, and he goes, "Molasses, so what?
Smells like opium, right? What's a big deal?"
He goes, "I'm not worried. Why should I worry about this?" And young Jun says, "I'm not worried about what it is. I'm worried about what it isn't. It's not Chinese." And young Jun proceeds to explain to him that basically Longzi are using locally grown molasses to sell their product, and that's how they're able to outbid them, because Hop Wei is using the old 6 corporations or 6 companies, which I guess is a Chinese. They are obviously native Chinese.
Yeah.
And they're able to underbid them and outsell them, and the customers are choosing them.
And that's what's happening, right? So Longzi essentially is buying product at a lower price, and then in turn charging a lower price, which, like you said, draws because junkies don't care about, they care about price and then quality, right? And so they'll take the cheaper stuff at a lower price, and that's basically putting the squeeze on the revenue of the Hop Wei, because they cannot compete. Like you said, they are ordering their molasses from China, and China obviously charges a premium in comparison to what you can get around here in San Francisco. And that's when Assam comes with an idea. Assam comes up with an idea to perhaps maybe we need to find a local cheap opium source. But from where?
They don't know. And also,
right.
Young Jun brings up a good point, how Father Jun is not going to like that.
Yeah.
And then Assam, he says, well, I mean, we all know this expression goes, better to ask for forgiveness than ask for permission.
And that's when he says, we'll find a source. And Young Jun kind of just says, okay.
Yeah, and this a little bit is them kind of almost kind of usurping a little bit from Father June. Like they're kind of like almost in a way saying, "Well, let's not worry about the old man." I mean, can you imagine in any organized crime someone say, "Yeah, don't worry about the boss"? I mean, how often does that work out well?
It's like Tony and Phil Leotardo cutting the deal to move the truckload of vitamins, but maybe we need to not tell Johnny about this one. And they left Johnny Sack out of the loop. This is exactly the same thing. I love the parallels.
Yeah, so good luck to you if you're hiding things from your organized crime boss.
These guys are digging themselves into a hole here, which they're going to get found out. Even young June says it. What's going to happen when like China realizes we ain't ordered from them in a while? And that's when they figure they'll deal with that as it comes. But they find themselves at a competitive disadvantage, and they've recognized it and trying to figure out a way to do something about it. Whereas for Father June, again, with the long game vision that he's got, maybe in this case, he is a bit short-sighted.
I would say so. I mean, I don't know much about running a 19th century drug empire.
No?
No, I didn't study that in school. I missed that day. But I agree with you. I think the Father June might not. I think in this case, the short view actually might be a little bit better than the long view. Because if you're not making profits in the meantime, how are you even going to have a long?
Yeah,
long
if your
term?
competitor is getting all of the revenue from the local clientele, then you're out of business. And that's what these guys have recognized. They're going to be out of business.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like any other product. I mean, if you're being outsold, you're not going to stay in business very long. That's just it.
The scene now cuts to the site of the Teddy Boy Massacre, which was perpetuated by Atoy, Assam, and Lai. And we see Bill literally holding the hand of the guy that got his hand cut off. And Lee is there, Bill is there, and the chief is there. And Lee immediately is doing his great detective work, like always. And he is laying out the whole situation to all of them. And the chief, though, he ain't got time for that. The chief wants results, right?
Yeah, we've seen this time and again with Lee, and this is the first time I think we've seen Lee in this episode.
Yeah.
And it's the same scenario that we've seen with him before. That he's the only cop that really seems to understand about detective work. And I don't know how this was going in the 19th century, but he's the only one, at least in this world, that has any sort of sense for this. Like, hey, let's look at the evidence. And they just want, like you said, they just want results. Chief Flanagan just wants results. He just wants them to bring in any Chinese guy, I guess. Maybe that, because they know that if it's swords, it's Chinese.
Yeah, and Lee snaps at the chief there. Pretty, stepping out of line. You're right. You don't talk to your boss that way and on the job. And Lee storms off. And that's when the chief looks at Bill and says, "What the hell was that?" And Bill says, "I don't know." And that's when the chief says, "Just go find me a fucking swordsman and get your boy Lee in line," he says.
Yeah, and Bill walks out and he says to someone, "What did he say?" He says, "Show him the head the fuck out or something. Get him the fuck out of here."
He says, "Go calm down that cunt over there," he says.
Oh yeah, even worse. Okay. Ooh. 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 The Europeans throw that word around like it's nothing.
No, like it's nothing, dude. It's such a hard word. It's it bears such weight when it's used, and it's one of those words that I hate to hear people use with intent. It's funny in a joke when Richard Pryor says it, but when someone's using it in a vicious manner, man, it hits you right at your heart if you have
that's what husbands generally recognize as the point of no return.
Yeah, you're over right there. You've crossed the chasm at that point if you're using that word. So Bill follows Lee out of the scene, and he says, "What the hell was that in there?" Obviously meaning about Lee snapping at the chief, and Lee tries to be funny.
Well, just before that, as Bill's walking out, we see Lee drinking some sort of medication.
Right. That's true. Right? So, after effects of his beating that he took at the end of season 1.
Right.
And obviously. When Bill asks him what the hell was that in there, Lee's answer was great. Multiple homicides. And Bill's like, "Come on. You can't be talking to the chief like that." And he's like, "Yeah, I know. Even though I enjoyed it," Bill said.
Yeah, Bill's on his side. That's not the issue. Just the issue, you can't do it. Even though I enjoyed it.
Yeah. And then they start and then they start talking again, as sort of friends and colleagues. And that's when Lee and Bill asks Lee if he's still having these headaches. Is he still kind of, not feeling so good. And Lee says, yeah, and the doctors don't, the doctor says there's a lot that we don't know yet about head injuries, right? So, and this was in 1878. Imagine that, how little they knew.
I mean, yeah, yeah, it makes you appreciate being alive at this time. But yeah, so obviously they didn't know as much about head injuries as they do now, and you kind of get the sense that Lee is just kind of on his own and he's just figuring it out, and he's taking this medication, and it's making him snappy.
Yeah, and it probably is what's making him snappy. That's a good point. I didn't think of that. I didn't think of it being a side effect of the medication. But that's when they decide that they're going to go talk to Chow, and the scene ends there. The next scene cuts to horse-drawn carriage filled with what looks like to be Chinese laborers through the streets of San Francisco, and the carriage is met by a group of Irish thugs holding sticks and bats in their hands, ready to do some damage.
Yeah, and the camera just focuses in on the Irish thugs, and it stays there as they move forward, and you hear the sounds, and you know what's going on. You don't need to see it.
Yeah, we don't see the beating, but we certainly do hear the beginning, the first couple of blows, don't we?
Yeah, yeah. And this scene is pretty self-explanatory.
Yeah, right away. Obviously, these were the laborers heading to Penny's factory, right? And that's who's catching the beatdown right now. From there, the scene cuts to Chow's place, and it's a police raid. You see cops walking out with multiple boxes of Chow's stuff. Lee and Bill are there, and Chow is pleading to them. Is that how you treat me after, I thought we had a good relationship? And Bill's not having that at this point, though, is he? The heat's too much for him.
Yeah, Bill's frustrated, and he's not going to be playing around with Chow anymore, even though they have sort of a playful relationship. This is not playful at all. He's pissed, and he wants to know about people being cut up in Chinatown. And and he says something to the effect of about frustration. And then he goes, I know you know something. And Chow turns around and goes, yeah, maybe I know something about you too. And then he kind of hints, and I'm guessing that he knows about his relationship with the Fung Hai.
Absolutely has to do with the collecting activities that he's doing for the Fung Hai.
But you also notice when Lee kind of snapped at Chow, that Chow kind of looked at Lee for a second. I wonder if he kind of suspects something about Lee, because now we know that Lee is a little bit more testy these days, and Chow almost like there was a hint of there's something I recognize there, and I thought he was going to say something about Lee, but he didn't really.
Yeah, I thought Chow, the look he gave Lee there was kind of like, listen, new guy, step back. This ain't for you. This conversation, men are talking, kind of thing. I kind of got that. I kind of got that hint there. And the whole
adults are talking.
Yeah, exactly. Adults are talking now, Junior. You're new on the scene. You don't know anything about Chinatown. But anyway, the whole point of what they were doing here was, in a sense, to put the screws to Chow to get him to talk. You want your stuff back? Start telling us stuff about Chinese swordsmen, please. And that's when you wonder, how long is it going to take before Chow cracks? Because if he can't ply his wares, then what is he going to do?
Right. He's a businessman.
First and foremost, he is a businessman. And not only does he deal in tangible items, but he deals in information. But looks like he needs both of those streams to keep his income afloat. We're now at Penny's factory, and in drops by Mr. Merriweather. We heard his name earlier in the episode when the mayor told her she should sell the factory. So we kind of know already what his motivation is when he shows up, and he's not really hiding it either. He's making it clear that he's willing to make an offer.
And he's sort of playing the same card that her husband did, saying that, though the wife of the mayor shouldn't be involved in this situation, or something to that effect. And again, much like with her husband, she didn't really care to hear that. She's strong-willed. She's bullheaded. She's not going to give up the business. And I don't know if it's because of, maybe she feels it's some sort of. Do you think it's because she considers it the family business? Like she's, I got to continue on.
Two things. It's the family business, but don't forget also, I sold my ass to keep this place in line. So now I'm going to keep running it because I didn't sell my ass all for naught.
Good point. That's a really good,
running it,
really good point. Yeah.
To put it as bluntly as I just did, or as crassly as I just did. That's the point, right? The only reason that factory even still existed at this stage of the Warrior universe is because she married the mayor, which she didn't want to do. So now she's not going to just sell it not have the factory that she kind of put her butt on the line for, and then still be married to the mayor. Honey.
Excellent point. That's a really good point.
That's not
kudos to
happening.
you.
And she's being kind of blunt with Merriweather. And that's when in comes, I think it was the guy that was like the escort on the carriage that we saw the beating happen earlier. He comes into the office right away with one of the beaten down Chinese worker. And Penny's attention now turns right away from Merriweather and right to her Chinese laborer. And Merriweather has a little wise ass comment there at the end for her too, doesn't he?
Yeah, no doubt you've hired good security.
Just, always looking to step on the little guy. And that's just another case of a guy looking to lord his position over someone else.
Yep.
All right. We are now Assam and Chow find each other, and they're at a toys. Chow's having a drink. I think he's drowning his miseries in the bottom.
Yeah, he doesn't look happy.
Yeah, he doesn't look happy at all. He's drowning his miseries in the bottom of a glass. Assam kind of sidles over to him and tells him he's looking for some information. He's willing to pay for the information, and he wants to find out where he can get a local opium source. And Chow, everyone's trying to give Assam advice. Chow does the same thing here.
Yeah, and Chow's in this case though, he's pretty testy himself, and he says something to the effect goes in or about Father Jun, and he mentions the 6 companies. So already he's kind of pointing out that Father Jun is not going to be kosher with this. Does he know about this? And
what actually was transpired was young Jun and I are looking for a local opium source, and he goes, "You mean Father Jun?"
Yes, yeah.
And that's when he says, "No, young Jun."
Yeah, and that's when Chow, pretty much at that point, Chow's going to be signing off on that because he's not going to cross Father Jun.
Yeah, it's funny though, because Chow immediately he cautions against it, but he says to him, he goes, "What is this all about? Like, what's the game here? What's the whole point of it? Right? Are you trying to just like prove a point because of you getting your butt kicked? Because he says to him, get the fuck over it," he says.
Yeah, he goes, young Jun has daddy issues, but what's your excuse? Or what,
right.
He goes, young Jun has daddy issues. Like you said, get the fuck over it.
Exactly. So again, someone else telling Assam, watch where you tread. Okay.
Yep.
And Assam just says, are you going to help me? You're not going to help me. And Chow keeps the money because kind of like, I did help you with the advice I gave you.
But didn't he give him back part of it? He goes, this is for discretion, which he kind of said at the beginning of the conversation too. Something, he goes, people pay for information. I think he said something like that.
Yeah. And that money he kept was for him to keep his mouth shut. Right.
Yes.
So there you have it. So Assam got his answer in a way, which was, I'm not the one that's going to help you try to do this incredibly foolish thing.
Yeah. Because we don't know much about the 6 companies yet, but it seems like this is something that's like a deal breaker for at least a lot of the old school people.
It's kind of like that's like the Chinese mob warehouse where you have to buy all your stuff from, and then each mob is a little franchise, and they'll have to buy their things from one place and then turn around and sell them at a markup. I get the sense that that's sort of like the 6 companies are like the main tongs in a sense, and all the other tongs elsewhere in the world are affiliates, so to speak. It's kind of the sense I'm getting.
Okay.
A toy slides over after Assam leaves and sits down with Chow, and he's still testy, and he says to her, this little hobby of yours is causing me headaches.
Right. And at first,
hobby.
Yeah, at first I don't know whether she's playing dumb or she genuinely doesn't understand what he's talking about, because he's being coy because he's not going to flat out say it. Right. But she either quickly catches on or she knew all along. I guess it's up for you to decide. But he basically says to her, he goes, "I'm getting pressure from the cops because of your little habits at night." Yeah. And she goes, "Well, they'll never believe you if you tell them." And she goes, "What'd you tell them?" And he goes, "Never overestimate or underestimate me under pressure," or something like that.
Yeah. So when she says to him, "I was thinking of laying low for a while anyway," he says, "I think that's a stellar idea." He goes, "It's better that we keep that a secret." And then that's when she turns it around on him and says, "Speaking of secrets, have you gone to see your secret?"
Yeah, that was a little bomb. I didn't know what that. Did you know what that was about?
No idea. And I still don't know because obviously they both know something because he says tomorrow. He's going to see his secret tomorrow. So whatever that means, I mean, you can kind of start to deduce, but it's hard to tell because this warrior world has a way of throwing you some serious curveballs. So I cannot wait to find out exactly what secret it is that Chow has been hiding, right? And that's the end of that scene. Now we see a scene. It's sort of like a bit of a montage, right? You see people partying in the bar. You see people walking on the streets. It's nighttime. It's kind of dirty and dingy. I wasn't sure. It didn't look like Chinatown to me because there was a lot of white people in the activities that were going on. And we find out we're not in Chinatown. We're back at the Barbary Coast because there is Ah Sam in the ring, kicking ass again and choking out a dude.
Yeah, and except this time, unlike the first time, Assam seems a little bit more confident. No flashbacks to Lee Young.
Right.
He's a little bit more sure of himself. And he ends up choking a guy out.
Right. And then that's when we see like the routine of him going upstairs to get paid by Rosalita Vega, and they start talking again. As I guess it must be like their little habit or routine. And he says to her, "Hey, you said to me that you would help me find what I'm looking for, didn't you?" And she says, "Yeah, I did say that." So it looks like there's some sort of alliance coming here with these two now, Mike.
Yeah, I'm guessing it has something to do with molasses. I can't imagine what else it might be.
I'm not sure. That's a good point. I didn't know really what he was alluding to. Is it the molasses? Is it something else? Because he didn't, he was pretty cryptic about what he was looking for to her. He didn't tell her anything. So I'm wondering exactly what it is what kind of favor he's going to hit her up for.
Well, also think about it, right? They're in the port, they're on the water. And where else do you get it over the salt, right?
Yeah, it gets delivered from somewhere, right? It comes in on a ship from someplace.
Right. That was my thinking at that point.
Scene cuts away again. It's still night. It's still dingy. We're on a street corner, and there are some working ladies standing on the corner, and a carriage comes pulling up, I guess looking to select some companionship for the night. And one of the girls gets chosen. She steps into the cart, and it's Buckley.
Buckley.
Buckley is Buckley procuring the services of ladies of the night?
And apparently he likes redheads.
Apparently he likes redheads, right? Because they turned down a couple before he picked the redhead, right?
Yep.
And that's kind of where that scene ends. And I was left wondering, what? Like, I'm not sure. Like, you never got the inclination. The way Buckley looks down on the mayor for his activities,
right,
makes you wonder what's going on here. And I don't think that it's flesh trade that he's looking for.
Well, I actually beg to differ with you because I think it is, but I think that Buckley, my impression, Buckley is the type that he wants to have his needs met. He wants to be sexually satisfied, but he doesn't want the strings of a relationship. He just wants the simple, just sex and no other strings attached. I don't think Buckley really is interested in a real relationship.
No, of course not. I mean, if you're going to prostitutes, that's not a relationship, right? But I was just curious because it didn't seem like, let's put it this way, that line of behavior didn't seem to me like it's in Buckley's wheelhouse. I almost felt like there's something ulterior going on there. I don't know why. Maybe I'm reading too deep into it.
You could be. We'll find out.
We're back at not Hop Wei, but Long Z headquarters, and it's Mei Ling and Lee Yang. They're in bed. They're having pillow talk. And
they're spooning.
They're spooning. She is worried, right? She is worried that the Hop Wei will break the treaty.
Right. And she's really more talking about her brother. I got the impression anyway. She's talking more about her brother than the Hop Wei more than anything, because she says, he doesn't really know me, but now I'm beginning to wonder if I know him. And
that's a good point. I think she realizes they don't know each other anymore.
Right. And we see that she's worried about him. She's possibly more worried about him than the Hop Wei, because she's dismissed Father Jun as old and young Jun as not being capable of leadership. But now she sees her brother as a potential rival, and she's wondering, do I really know him?
You know what's bothering her? She doesn't know him anymore, but she does know him. And the part that she knows is what's scaring her about the part that she doesn't know anymore. Because before he had a little bit of allegiance to her, he still had a heart for her. And now after she, almost had him diced, as he put it, all bets are off, the gloves are off, and Assam is now
Yeah.
chosen his side. And he said to her, don't be shocked if I'm the guy you're up against eventually. And that stuck with her, obviously, or she would not have confided in Li Yang about it, Mike.
Yep. She's worried about her brother, and she knows him and she doesn't know him, and that might even, like you said, be actually scarier.
It's really shaping up to be an interesting confrontation as we get into episode 2. But before this episode ends, we've got one more scene to talk about. It's still nighttime, and an explosion happens, a big, loud explosion, and it doesn't take a mathematician or a statistician or a different kind of mathematician to figure out exactly who's behind that explosion. And we see it. It's revealed to us. It's Mr. Leary. He's nearby admiring his handiwork.
Yeah, we find out what he did with that dynamite after all.
What did he blow up, though? What was that shop or store?
At first, I thought it might have been Penny's mill. That would have made sense, but obviously it wasn't that. I couldn't really tell what he was blowing up. It looked like some random business, maybe something we'll find out about later.
I think we're probably doing a bad job by either one of us for not recognizing that. And hopefully one of the viewers who watches this episode had a better attention span at that point and can point out to us maybe in the comments exactly what it was we missed there. Because what did Leary blow up? You know what I actually thought it was? I felt like because we didn't really know what the place was that he exploded, I feel like he was sort of doing a test run just to see if the dynamite worked.
Interesting. That's very possible.
Because he's got it in his mind, like you said, you thought it was Penny's factory. He's probably got some ideas on paying back Penny for hiring Chinese laborers. So maybe he's, practicing, so to speak, to see what it's going to take. Because that factory that Penny owns is much, much larger than that storefront we saw him explode here at the end of the episode.
Yeah, and that's a point of contention.
But that does wrap up the episode and literally ends in explosive fashion, Mike. And I can't say enough about the way they launched season 2. Like you said, picking up right where it left off. It felt seamless. It feels seamless. And now we're going to get next week into season 2, episode 2. And I can't wait.
I can't wait either. They set us up for so many storylines and so many threads to play out. And I can't wait to see. I mean, even though obviously we have seen them, but I can't wait to see them again because there's some things that I forgot. There's things that I've missed, and I'm looking.
Definitely. And as we talked about, as we rewatch this show again, and this is my third rewatch of the show, I'm watching it with a slightly different eye since we're doing this analysis and sort of criticism, so to speak, of the show. So I am picking up things and making connections that I might not have made before. And so that is actually helping me enjoy this show even more because the genius of the writing and the winding path and the multiple tendrils of this storyline are captivating.
Absolutely. The writing is incredible. The way they thread the storylines together and the little comedic moments and the left turns that characters take. I can't stress it enough. This is one of my favorites.
Not as much humor in this episode as some of the past episodes, though. This one kind of stuck to the I think the only real chuckle I got was Leary at the cemetery after Sophie left him standing there staring at his wife's tombstone. But I don't remember getting many more laughs from this episode. So that was a bit of a departure from the recipe they normally use to put a show on.
Yeah, they give you just enough comedy just to keep it because it can't be too heavy, right?
Yeah.
Everything has to have a little bit of a break here and there.
Yeah.
But it gives you plenty of tension. And if you haven't watched the show, you have to watch the show. Quit your job, whatever you got to do, watch the show.
Exactly. Who needs? We're working for chumps anyway. That is the end of this week's episode of Diced Onion. Thanks for checking in with us. Thanks for watching. Thanks for commenting. Some of you have really offered some great comments. Please continue to do that because we love the interaction. Like and subscribe, please. We need more followers to our channel. Tell your friends, spread the word, anyone you know that watches Warrior, and get them to check out this show. But that's it for this week. We will see you next time.